My trip to Japan was one of the best 10 days of my life. I met so many new people, I made so many new friends, and I made connections that will definitely last me a lifetime. One of the first places that our group went to in Japan was like a little tiny Japanese style Wawa, and it's obviously not a Wawa, but that's just what it reminded me of. It had little food and snacks and little things you could pick up, and I actually bought a surgical mask, which in Japan you people would wear in the streets when they are sick so that they don't breathe on people. So I got myself a cute little souvenir. A cool thing about Japan is that they are really into natural remedies. So in one of the hotels that we were in, there was actually a little spa, like a hot spring that was included in basically the basement, and there were these little outfits that they wanted you to wear to basically go down, and you would take these off completely. There was a side for the men and the side for the women. Shown here is the women's side, and basically everyone was just naked and they would go into the hot springs, and that was one of my favorite parts because I love baths. So this was just like a super fancy Japanese bath. And as you may know, in Japan, they drive on the left side of the road, and the cars are a little bit different than American cars. Instead of the driver being on the left side, they would be on the right side, and the cars were generally a little more, I don't know, like bubbly. I don't know. I thought they were really cute. They weren't really bulky like American cars. Another cool thing about Japan is the way that they build their houses. They kind of remind me of like old Chinese temples and things like that, in the way that their roofs have like individual shingles. Now, I don't know if they're made of like ceramics, or I highly doubt they're made of ceramics, but I don't know what they're made of. But they are definitely not what I was used to in America. Since our trip to Japan was entirely funded by Japan's government, we had to go to many lectures. We had to wear a bunch of name tags saying who we were and what we represented, and we were basically ambassadors for America. Now, we were in this program called the Kakehashi program, which means Bridges for Tomorrow, and what the program was trying to accomplish is trying to make Japan allies with America by bringing in the youth and basically tying them in early. Now, one of my favorite things about Japan was definitely the food. There is so much variety in all the different kinds of dishes they make. And there are so many different kinds of vending machines that sell all sorts of things. Now, in America, you have vending machines that only will give you ice cream or drinks or something like that. But in Japan, they will give you hot food like hot dogs and french fries. They will give you alcohol, which hopefully nobody tried, but they will also give you drinks, sodas, juices, and things like that. There was also a different style of green tea, like traditional green tea, and it's called matcha, and it is very good for you. And one thing that I was not expecting in Japan was that there were different kinds of toilets than I was used to. So in America, we have westernized toilets, and this is the traditional, like, seat up, seat down, you sit down, you flush the toilet, etc. But in Japan, they have Western toilets and they have like the traditional toilets, which basically is not a toilet at all. It is a hole in the ground that you have to squat over and do your business. And I found this a little difficult, but after a while, everyone started to get the hang of it. But at first, it really freaked a lot of people out. So during one of our stays there in Japan, we visited a high school that was in this very small town called Minami Aizu. And this was a town that was inside a valley that was surrounded by mountains. It was very beautiful. I got to meet a lot of the Japanese students there, and they were very fun people. They showed us traditional fan dances and traditional fighting styles, as well as showing us how to write with the traditional Japanese calligraphy. And they also taught us how to make little origami, which is, hopefully you know what it is, but if not, it is the folded pieces of paper. Now, during our stay in Japan, we spent about 2 to 3 days living in a Japanese house with the host family. So, my host family was an older couple, a man and a woman, and I don't think they had any kids, but they were farmers. And so inside the rooms, instead of having traditional beds that us Americans are used to, they had futons, which are basically little thin mattresses that are actually very comfortable, by the way, that are laid out on the floor, and then you put blankets and pillows on over top. While we were at the homestay, our host father took us to a shrine that was in his small village. And I thought this was really interesting because being a Christian, I thought seeing all these different views of basically how the world worked, it just really intrigued me. So this one shrine, it was a Shinto shrine, and it was for one of the mountains that was there. And Shinto people, they believe that each thing has like a god counterpart. So the shrine is for the god of the mountain and the trees and things like that. And so basically we went up there and we had to put in a little bit of money. It wasn't very much. We had to clap a few times and then bow, and that was how we not really worshipped, but that's how we gave thanks. And hopefully, by doing that, they believe that it would bring good fortune to the people on that mountain. Another interesting thing about the family we stayed with is I started to notice that with all the farmers, they had these houses that were kind of like really big sheds that they would traditionally store the food that they had grown for the winter. And I noticed on each one of these houses there was the symbol for water, mizu. And so I asked my teacher what that meant. And she said that back in the traditional times, they used to put that symbol to ward away fire spirits. Because, water puts out fire and all that fun stuff. I thought that was really interesting. Our host father also took us to a Buddhist temple, and I thought that this was a really cool tie into my project because they had like all the traditional things that they did, like the bells they would ring a certain amount of times, the ancient scriptures they had, the statues and everything like that. And then they would have like little TVs and microphones next to it. So I thought that was a really cool way to kind of snapshot that so that I could use it in my project. Trying to explain that Japan integrates their traditional values with like modern ones like this. Plus, it was just absolutely beautiful, so I had to take pictures. Also, something that I thought was really cool is that while we were in Japan, we actually had the opportunity to hand reap rice that was actually growing in a rice field. We all put on boots, they gave us a scythe, and they just said, go at it. And they taught us how to tie it onto the bundles. And they also let us drive one of the machines that would also kind of dig up the rice, of course, with supervision. But that was also another cool way to tie in my project with how they have modern machines with how they traditionally do it. And they still do it both ways. The Japanese view of a barbecue is basically nothing like the American view of a barbecue. In Japan, they basically have a concrete block and they fill it with coals and they put what looks like a cookie sheet on top of it. And then they take these thin strips of steak and other vegetables and they basically just fry it on there. And then once it's cooked, the people around, they just kind of serve themselves. Each person has a little serving bowl full of this sauce. I have no idea what it was. It was delicious, that's all I know. And you would take your chopstick and you would pick off the meat from the cookie sheet that looks like a cookie sheet, and you would take the meat and you would dip it in the sauce and you would eat it, and it was very delicious. One of the last few things we did while we were in Japan is visit a very old traditional style Japanese village. And the thing that I thought was super cool about this is that it wasn't just like a museum walkthrough. There were people that actually lived there. Like people that actually went through with all these things, not because of the museum, but because that's how they lived their lives. Now, they had thatched roofs that was basically, it was just I don't know what they used. It was some kind of straw or something, and it would have to be like a few feet thick because they used to have very, very heavy snowfall, and if it collapsed the ceiling, then your family was done for. And this place was absolutely beautiful. There were more shrines. There was one that was for only males. I'll tell you about that in a second, but it was for good eyesight. So the reason that it was only for males is because back in the old Japanese days, it was kind of like America, how women didn't really have very many rights. So I'm guessing that they were trying to keep it authentic, and they only let the men in our group do this.